Welcome back to Ask a Coroner, inside the coroner's office, the podcast where we answer the questions people have always wanted to ask about death investigations. I'm Mark Hammond, Boyd County Coroner.
I'm Bailey Rucker, Deputy Coroner, and today's podcast is going to get into a question that really applies to everybody because a lot of people just don't know, and that's what happens when somebody dies at home.
And that's probably 80%, 90% of our cases. Mm-hmm. And that varies across the United States. That's what's pretty neat about death investigation is everybody does something different a lot of times. So when we look at that, it could be as simple as you're going to call a certain number, and that becomes an intake. And in turn, they will decide whether they're going to come out. Some jurisdictions, they're not going to come out. The doctor's going to sign off on that case. Mm-hmm. In Kentucky, or at least in our jurisdiction, anything that happens at home, and whether it be sudden or expected, unless it's a hospice case, we're gonna take off and we're gonna investigate that.
Mm-hmm. So we have like unexpected, unattended. So what qualifies that unexpected death?
Unexpected is usually when somebody comes in, finds somebody deceased in a house or in a residence. It could be the fact that they wake up in the morning and somebody's deceased in the bed. That's a normal thing that we see a lot of. Or somebody comes home from work, finds somebody. Those happen a whole lot of times. So that is unexpected. They didn't have a lot of medical issues, or they did, and they just come home and find them there.
So one thing that we kind of talked about in previous episodes was people not knowing, in our case, to call the coroner, 911, funeral home. So what happens when somebody finds somebody unattended? And
we have that a lot. We have people that have actually called our office. We've had people that's called the funeral home, and they, in turn, the funeral home will call us and say, hey, so-and-so's just called. They say their mom, their dad, whoever has died, and we just wanted to give you that information, and they want to use us, but what do we need to do? Mm-hmm. Same thing with people's called doctor's offices. There's a number of things that happen. The right answer is, if it's not a hospice case, especially in this state in Kentucky, is you pick up the phone and call 911. When 911 gets called, then certain people respond at that time. So you're looking at 911 happens here. Hey, I found my father deceased. I found my mother deceased. 911 will in turn send law enforcement, which is either the sheriff or one of the city police officers. That's who would respond there. EMS responds because somebody needs to declare death. And we'll talk more about that as we go on. So those are who, and a lot of times the fire department. Fire department always goes. And those three agencies will show up at your residence. We get a lot of people that says, why so many people? And we'll break that down as we go on today.
So you mentioned hospice. How does somebody maybe go into hospice care, and how does that affect us going out or not?
So that usually works, and we have a big hospice center here. And so we deal with hospice on a daily basis most times, and they do a wonderful job at what they do. So with a hospice case, once hospice comes into the house and people go ahead and get that set up, then what happens a lot of times is the nurse is assigned to that case, and they will tell the family, once the person is deceased, call me. Mm-hmm. And in turn, they will call the nurse will come out and declare death, and then they will in turn call the funeral home. Funeral home will come and pick up the body and take it back to their funeral home to handle all that. So we don't get involved unless it's an unnatural death. Somebody has been injured in some way, and that's what's placed them in hospice. We talked about overdose deaths. A lot of times where Narcan's used, and they may have brain anoxia. So there's different things that would cause us to still come out, but that is few and far between. Probably since I've been doing this, you can count on one hand. Now there is jurisdictions that where hospice makes that notification, even though it's not a coroner's case. They will make that notification to intake, and then the intake will decide, hey, do we need to go or don't we need to know? Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people don't realize that. I'll give you an example of that, and it wasn't hospice, but at the hospital we get calls all the time also, and we decide, hey, do we need to go, don't we need to go? Is it an unnatural death? And Saturday evening, well, I got a call Saturday morning of a elderly gentleman that fell, and he fell at home, hit his head, and caused a bleed on his brain. And they made him comfort care. When you make comfort care, it's kind of like being in hospice. They basically make you comfortable till you pass away. They knew nothing was going to change the outcome of his condition. So when that happened, that call normally a doctor would have signed off on that. And in turn, that became our call. So we had to open up a case. We in turn had to go in and investigate that, because that death went from being a natural death to an accidental death because of his head injury from the fall. So we see things like that all the time. And hospice always sends us a sheet, and we call it a natural death form, so we know exactly what's going on. My opinion is a lot of deaths that people think, okay, are natural deaths, and a lot of offices can miss that of it being something else just because the person is elderly, the person has a lot of medical issues, things like that. Just because they have a lot of medical issues, unless it's investigated, doesn't mean that it's a natural death. It could be a lot of other things. We've caught a lot of deaths because we do toxicology so much on everybody that once we get the toxicology back, it's like, that's not natural. It's actually now an accidental death due to an overdose because they've mixed their medicine up or different things like that. So I think natural deaths or in-home deaths a lot of times are underreported compared to what they should be and really be investigated. That's why in our stance and our general standard operating guidelines is we respond. Doctors will not be signing those death certificates that we sign them as a coroner's office unless it's a hospice case. That's the only time we're not going to sign that death certificate.
Yeah, because I think that goes back to previous episodes where we mentioned how we have the means to find the actual root cause, and we'll work that case backwards for as long as we need to find what actually put them in that type of care.
And you're exactly right. A lot of instances to where if we would have let a doctor sign that case out, then it would have been a wrong diagnosis, and it would have went down wrong, statistics would have been wrong, and it would have been underreported. It's like the case I took the other night when I looked at the natural death form. That doctor had wrote on there cardiac arrest and respiratory failure. Well, cardiac arrest on a death certificate is not a cause of death, and a lot of people get that confused, and it's not. Everybody goes into cardiac arrest. It's why did you go into cardiac arrest? He did go into cardiac arrest because of respiratory failure, but we got to dig deeper because that respiratory failure was actually caused by his head injury. And what it does is, as the brain swells, it pushes down on certain places in the brain, which in turn controls your breathing. It's called the brainstem. And so if the brainstem is being stressed and all that comes down on there, because there's very little room to move in the brain, it doesn't have room for expansion. And so in turn, what the doctor put on there as a natural death due to respiratory failure and, quote, cardiac arrest is not the correct thing. So that would have been an underreported death. And the way we saw it and what we turned it into was an accidental death due to the brain bleed, which turned into the respiratory failure, which caused his death. So we see that a lot. And I think if you really look across the United States, you're going to see a lot of underreported deaths because it's easy if you're working intake to say it's a natural death, the doctor's going to sign that out. Well, the doctor's signing it out due to medical history, not due to what happened now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, complete sense. And to stay on the hospice topic, I think some of our cases are people leaving the hospital after being there for an extended amount of time, deciding to go on hospice care, but then passing away at home before hospice even gets there, and then families don't understand why we still have to come.
And that happens a lot. I mean, that happened the other day. Hospice called because they needed help with a case, and it's been probably a month ago, And we did respond to that, and we helped the family out and make sure they got what they needed. But there's a lot of times hospice is just one agency, and usually they have a number of nurses that do fantastic jobs, but they're like anybody else, they're overloaded.
Yeah.
So somebody goes home, like you said, that is, they go home on a Monday, and hospice is supposed to arrive on Wednesday. They die Tuesday night. They're not in hospice care yet. That becomes our case. And we see that a lot of times because they're scheduled to go, but they haven't made it there yet.
Yeah. Okay, so now back to when people call 911 that actually get us to respond, and all of those units are there, first responders are there. So what is the actual pronouncement of death that causes them to call us?
So somebody comes in, and we see a lot on the what we call a CAD report or the 911 report. And somebody says they've come in, they found their mother deceased, and she's on the couch, and she's cold to the touch. Paramedics get there, and they hook up a monitor. They make sure that she is cold to the touch. Rigor mortis is set in, which we talked about before, which is the stiffening of the body. They may have some lividity, which is the blood pulling to the lowest point of the body. They check their pupils. They're fixed and dilated, which means if you shine a light in there, they do not answer that light at all. Nothing happens. And so, in turn, once that's declared, they hook a monitor to them. And when they put the monitor on them, they're taking that monitor, they're putting it on them, and they declare death in usually 2 to 3 leads on the monitor. In other words, they look at 2 or 3 different views of the heart. With that, once they look at that, then if it's straight line and all those leads, then death is declared. We still don't use that time. At that point in time, paramedics would say, we need the coroner's office. We would respond at that time. Once we get there and we get on the scene, then that's the time of death that we use. And everybody uses something different, but the standard that we use and the standard we set forth is when we arrive on the scene.
Okay, so I think another topic that is super important is the kind of environment that is on scene. Like from the time you arrive to the time you're leaving, and even the full investigation afterwards in the office, to take care of those grieving families once more. How important is it to stay professional on the scene? That's
the biggest thing is we see families at their worst day of their life. Somebody has just died that they love very much. So when I arrive on the scene, of course, most of the time we don't have everybody flooding the house. If the person is declared deceased, usually paramedics will release the fire department, so they're not needed unless they think we're going to need help with moving the body. Usually the law enforcement, whatever law enforcement agency, they're there on the scene and they stay the whole time with us. Paramedics will take us in. We get there, and my thing is I like to talk to the medics first, talk to law enforcement, see what I have. And then from there, we will go in the house. And they will point me into who is the next of kin, whether that be a daughter, a son, it could be a husband or wife, whoever's there. I will go to them and talk to them. I want to make sure I introduce myself. Hey, I'm here to help you. We're going to be the one investigating the death. I'll ask them what happened just to get a very short kind of rundown of just what they found. I left for work at 9 o'clock this morning. I came home at 5, and they were deceased in their chair. So from there, I will go and I'll tell them, I'll be back in just a minute. I need to go look at the body. So I want to look at the body and see exactly what we've got. And the reason I do that is you got to remember that police do know a little bit about death investigation. So does paramedics. They see death all the time. But they're not trained specifically in that. It's like a veterinarian going to pronounce somebody dead or doing open heart surgery or something like that on somebody. It doesn't happen. You got to have a specialty, and our specialty is death. So we want to make sure that we cover that, and we need to make sure that we don't see anything that they don't. If that's okay, then we start taking our pictures, and pictures are inside and out. So people a lot of times on their worst day, emotions run high. We don't want that. So we usually try to work with that family. Hey, do you have anybody else coming over? And I will sit down one-on-one with them while people are in the background, usually the transporter or the paramedics are moving the deceased. But before we do any of that, I always ask, is there anybody come? Do you want to say goodbye to them? Mm-hmm. All that comes into play because people remember that. People remember the worst day of their life, somebody was there that cared. And you got a job to do, but you still have to have compassion, and you still got to care about that family. Yeah. So once that's all settled and we decide how we're going to handle this, nobody else is coming, they've said their goodbyes, then we will move the decedent out. I tell everybody that the quicker we can do that, the better off. I don't like to let somebody lay that's deceased. I want to get them. I think that's disrespectful a lot of times unless there's a reason. If it's a murder, if it's something suspicious, anything like that, we're going to let that body be exactly where it's at until everybody that's investigating has had time to take pictures, has had time to do measurements, different things like that. But if it's a natural death at a house, then we're going to move that body as soon as we can. Then we can sit and talk to the family. Then we can get the demographics such as their age, their medical history, who their doctor is. All that stuff, I think, comes into play, and a normal death is still going to take us hours to work. We're not going to come in 10 minutes and take care of that. We're going to free up as many people as we can, and we're going to spend as much time as we can with the family to make sure they're taken care of. You know as well as I do, a lot of times, depending on the person, we don't want to leave that person by themselves a lot of times. Yeah. Chaplains come into play. Family comes into play. I've sat with families sometimes hours waiting for somebody to come back. One time I sat with a family 3 hours waiting for a son to get back because I didn't want to leave that family alone. They were that distraught, and they needed somebody. Mm-hmm. And I think all that comes into play.
Yeah. And people remember that, like you said, and it's so important. And that's how they start to feel comfortable, too, to even start, like, answering our questions more. And they'll be like, oh, well, yeah, you mentioned this, and they'll give you some more information on that. But also, I think that comes in with, like, notifications. We'll never notify somebody over the phone because of how distraught a family can get over the phone and try to drive somewhere. So talk about the notification process.
It's pretty neat that you brought that up because in Kentucky there's actually a law that says that we cannot do that. Does it happen from time to time? Sometimes it has to happen. You don't have a choice. The other night we had a family, we had a death, we had multiple deaths this weekend. This weekend's been extremely busy. Yes. We did, I think, 8 deaths in 2 days. We were doing 4 a day. And so one of my first deaths I investigated was a lady that lived in an apartment, but she didn't have anybody there. She didn't have any family. She didn't have anything like that. And all we had to go by was a phone number over in Ohio that came from a hospital as a next of kin. So I didn't have a choice but to make that phone call. But if we can help that at all costs, we make sure that we arrive in person. We always have at least 2 people there. EMS is usually on standby for that in case something does happen medically after you tell somebody that, because that's not uncommon. It's a high-stress thing that you're giving somebody the worst news of their life. So we have all that in place, and coroners and deputy coroners in Kentucky have to take at least a 4-hour class on death notifications just to make sure everything's done by the way it should be done. Yeah. So that class happens at every basic when you just got done doing basic. Yeah. So you had that in your basic class. So we see that in Kentucky, and then that's becoming more and more in other states. It may not be law, but it is part of the training that you go through. So you're just not walking in. The biggest thing is you don't want to be a robot. You don't want to be – we see death every day, and a lot of people say maybe you're callous to that or it's just the norm for you, but it's never the norm. It's never the norm to walk in and tell somebody that their loved one's dead. Yeah. So in turn, we take a lot of extra steps to make sure that that doesn't happen in a way that the family's going to remember that it was rude or that it was not meaningful for us to have to tell somebody that. And I that's one thing that I never want to see happen. Is I think that's one of the things that we have to work at and make sure that we we serve our families well.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I think it's Nathan's Law. That's the Kentucky law where you...
That is correct. Yeah, it's Nathan's Law.
So I've even seen, like, and this is in our jurisdiction, and it's not just us. It's law enforcement, detectives in our area, and us, to where even to keep a family member from driving, we've went and picked that family member up and brought them to the office or to other families so that they could have somebody to bear that news with.
And that's correct. Yeah, I mean, the other day we had a homicide. So in the homicide, we were working and we were busy doing a lot of things, collecting evidence, doing different things with the police side of it. So we knew an address, but we weren't for sure. We did a lot of tracking down, I should say. So the police went to that address, and that was the first thing I said was, if they are truly there, call me. I'll stop what I'm doing. I will come out there. If not, I will come bring them to the coroner's office because we needed identification. We needed different things answered. And so when the deputy called back, he was like, I made contact with somebody. They are going to get other family. I'm staying here with them, and then we'll be en route. And so it still worked out, but there's a lot of times, you're exactly right, that I or one of the deputies or somebody will make sure that we put them in our vehicle or they have a ride because we don't want them driving. We don't want anything like that. I tell most people when they talk to me, they don't remember anything I say, not till the next day or the day after. And that's one of the things that several years ago we created a pamphlet. And that pamphlet we leave with every single person that we come in contact with when we talk to the next of kin. And that pamphlet answers, it's a very small thing, but it answers common questions that people have. Who gives the death certificate out? When are they going to get it? Funeral homes. We put every funeral home on the back of the page that is in Boyd County because we don't recommend funeral homes. So we make sure that they have a listing of saying here, and then we also say there's funeral homes all over the county or all over different counties. You don't have to stick with Boyd County. You can get a funeral home anywhere. And we make sure that everybody knows that, but we leave them with resources that's going to help them. And one of the biggest things that I think that we lack, and it's lacked in the tri-state a lot, is grief counseling.
Yeah.
That's a big thing for people, and everybody grieves differently. And when you leave, we've seen everything. We've seen people get violent. We've seen people hit things, kick things. And we've seen people just ball up in a fetal position. I mean, everybody reacts differently. And that's where we want to make sure that we have the right people there when we talk about death. Yeah.
And I think another one of the hardest situations that we come across and put families in is the investigation that comes with a child death. And we'll break down a child death, I'm sure, in later episodes. But you mentioned taking pictures and stuff. You want to give that family the heads up. But with a child's death, they actually have to reenact the scene.
Yes, we do that, and we will. That's going to be a whole episode.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 episodes. Who knows?
It could be because it's very extensive.
But one of the things is the difference between that is there's so much more that goes into it.
Yeah.
And with the reenactment, we have reenactment dolls. We have different things like that we're going to really talk about so people kind of know what happens there. With an adult death, then we're still... if it's unexpected, I tell everybody, it doesn't matter how sick somebody is. If they die, it's the worst thing to that person. They may be in a better place.
Yeah.
But in reality, the family still loses them, which changes the dynamics of the family, and it changes everything for the rest of their life. And so we really try to be cautious on that because people will ask us, why do you take medications, which we'll get into? Why do we take so many pictures? Why do we need to know so much information? All this stuff that we use in an investigation. And what I tell everybody is if you investigate everything the same way, you got the same things that go on, then a lot of times that's going to help as it goes on with the investigation to determine and give closure to the family. That's where we want to be.
So a lot of families, which really it's kind of went down now that I think about it, but some families know what funeral home they want to use and everything. So once you're at that scene, you're leaving that scene, do you call the funeral home? Does the family, do the funeral home come to the office? How does that work?
What I always tell everybody, and the funeral homes we work with, what I tell everybody is we still have work to do at the office. We don't do toxicology on scenes for several reasons.
Yeah.
Number one, we want to see the body with better light. In our office, in our morgue, we have a lot better light than we do in a natural environment. So we want to have that. We got to do toxicology still. So what I tell the family is, if you know the funeral home, let's call them, and I'll get them on the phone, let them go ahead and tell them, and then I also tell the funeral home, hey, when I'm done, I'll give you a call. And I may say, hey, it'll be an hour, it'll be 2 hours, it just depends. If the family doesn't know what funeral home, or they need to talk that over, which happens probably 80% of the time at least, then I tell the family, once you all decide, there's no hurry, let me know and call the funeral home also. And we will work it out with the funeral home that when they can pick up their decedent or when they can pick up their loved one, and after that, the funeral home will handle everything. And that seems to work the best by any means. The other thing you got to look at is every death in this state has to be reported by law to Network from Hope. So I probably led into that, but a lot of people don't understand that, is that we have to report that to Network for Hope. And we've talked about that in other episodes, but Network for Hope is organ donation, and that could be corneas, it could be skin, it could be kidneys, it could be several things that they can go ahead and harvest, and all those help other people. So that a lot of times makes the time frame go a lot longer, because it could be hours before that body's able to be released. So what we have to do is, when we get back to the office, is we have to call a certain number, which is Network for Hope, and we give them the specifics of the case. Some people are ruled out, and they will say, they're ruled out, we can't use anything. And it's like, okay, then we're good to go ahead and release. Mm-hmm. If they say we're going to follow that decedent, then we give them the number to the next of kin. They, in turn, contact them, and they work through a series of questions. One of the first question, of course, is, do they want to donate? And they explain it a lot better than what we can explain it, because that's what they do. Mm-hmm. So they would explain how donation would help. It would help if, especially like corneas and skin and long bones and different things like that. That's going to help other people live, and it's going to help other people have a normal life, hopefully, after that's done. So they can decide. Family decides yes, no. Never Hope will also tell the family, well, they are a donor. They're listed on the donors list. That sometimes changes their mind one way or the other. But if the family says no, then yes, they're ready to release. If the family says, yes, we want to go ahead and do this and we want to follow, then in turn, that changes the whole game of when that body can actually go out and be released.
And that's another certification that we have to have too, like death notification, is actually giving families that kind of heads up that Network for Hope is going to be contacting them about their loved one.
And that's correct. And we've been lucky. Our whole office, as far as the deputies go, have that training. And it's a training that Network for Hope puts on. We do that usually through Zoom, and that gives us training on how to approach families, how to tell families and talk to families about organ donation. And I think that goes a long ways, and it also speeds the matter up, mm-hmm. because if we can talk to them and we get a yes or we get a no or we get a maybe, then we know which way that we can go and how long it's going to be to release that decedent to somebody.
Yeah. So last episode we talked a lot about, well, we broke down really autopsies. So how does autopsy work with release to funeral homes, and do funeral homes still get them from our office if we transport them back, or do they go to Frankfurt or another office?
So with an autopsy, we let the funeral home know that, hey, we're going to have to do autopsy on this body, And it will not, in our office, and everybody does things different. You go across, let's take Jefferson County. Jefferson County brings their bodies to the ME's office there in Jefferson County. So in turn, they're there and can get autopsy pretty quick, to where in Kentucky, especially in eastern Kentucky or northeastern Kentucky where we are, we're going to drive 2 hours to get that body autopsied. So we leave the next day, and we leave really early in the morning. We leave usually at 5 o'clock, 5:30. We're on the road, we're down there, and that body is back to us by noon. So we contact the funeral home if we know the funeral home, and we say, hey, this is what's going on. We're going to autopsy. We'll be back here by noon. Do you want us to leave it in Frankfort, or do you want us to bring it back? And it's up to the funeral home to decide what's going to happen from there. And so most funeral homes around here, they still believe in doing their own work, doing the embalming, all that things that need to be done on the funeral side. So in turn, they'll say, bring the body here. And we're courteous to where we'll say, hey, do you want us to call you when we're on our way back? Yes. And we will take that to the funeral home so they're not having to come out to our office and waste more time. They get the body as soon as they can, and they were able to take care of that.
So that brings up another thing. We have a few hotels in this area, too, where out-of-towners might pass away in a hotel room. So when, after, like, you've contacted family, everything, they've decided the funeral home, how does that decedent get back to a funeral home that's, say, out of state?
We tell the family the same thing, basically, and you're exactly right. We run in not only people that are in our hotels, but homeless, anything like that. Once we are able to decide that we have a next of kin, then it's work with whatever funeral home that you work with. And we've worked with several funeral homes out of state. One time, that statistic come out, and it was like we had worked with 58 different funeral homes from like 12 different states, all the way into Maine. We have in West Virginia a whole lot of times. So we work with the families and the funeral home both. So we'll tell the family, hey, call the funeral home will call us, and we will let them know when they can come and pick up the decedent and get them where they need to be.
So that brings up another thing when you mentioned next of kin. That's another kind of tough conversation sometimes you have to have with families or even friends that are maybe that person's caregiver on scene, but they don't have technically any legal jurisdiction, especially in Kentucky, in terms of next of kin rights.
People get real upset. I mean, really, they can get really upset about that because we have to follow the letter of the law, which basically says it's like power of attorney. Power of attorney, you can have medical power of attorney all day long, but once that person is deceased, the power of attorney stops, and we have to go to the next of kin. The next of kin may be and mothers get really upset because if somebody's married and they'll say, well, I'm the mother or I'm the father. Well, yes, you are, but the person that they're married to has the true next of kin. And so they have to make all the arrangements as far as that goes. You can work with them. And families work good together a lot of times. But then I'll also say, and you've heard me say this 100 times, death a lot of times brings out the worst in people. And in turn, when that happens, you have a lot of inner fighting in families, things like that. So it's like, okay, what do I do? What can I do to make this better? And a lot of times you have to just be really blunt with people and say, you know, the body doesn't move till I hear from such and such. And it has to be that next of kin. Now, the next of kin can relinquish that to whoever they want to. A case in point the other day, we had a death, and the gentleman was married, but they hadn't been together in years. Still, we had to get a hold of the wife. The wife, in turn, released that not to the adult children, but to the guy's mother. And the mother made the decision with the adult kids of where they wanted them to go. So that helped, but it was still a big thing to get that done. And sometimes we have to hold bodies for that reason. Somebody wants to step in and handle things, but they can't because legally we can't release that. So that goes in. It goes into even more legality issues that we need to make sure are totally documented and correct, or somebody's going to be left out.
Okay, so after a funeral home, death certificates kind of go through the funeral home as a process, especially to get to the family. So how do death certificates come across your desk, and how long does it usually take to get those officially signed out?
When I got into this, we had to actually have a typewriter, and we had to type death certificates.
Good Lord!
So that's gone many years ago now, which I'm very thankful for. So we have a electronic.
I've missed out on a lot.
Yeah. I've still. Matter of fact, it's funny because I had a typewriter that I bought that's still in the box because as soon as I bought that thing, we went to electronic death certificates, and it was like a godsend because
I thought I was going to have to pull out my Barbie typewriter.
It's like, here you go. So you never know what you're going to get. But the way it works is the funeral home starts that death certificate, and they will fill out the top of it. And then the bottom half of that is ours. And it comes electronics. We use Vital Statistics in Kentucky. So the death certificate hits Vital Statistics, and it automatically comes to me, or comes to one of the deputies, either way. Mm-hmm. So once that happens, then once everything is back, just because if somebody dies today and a funeral home sends me that, I don't sign it today.
Yeah.
I have to wait for medical reports such as toxicology. I have to wait for all the medical records to come in, all that stuff, and then I review every bit of that. Once all that's reviewed, then I'm ready to sign that death certificate. Say that takes 2 weeks. I always tell families 2 to 3 weeks. And so I sign that death certificate on a Monday. It goes into Vital Statistics electronically, and they look it over. They make sure all the spelling's correct. They make sure that there's no abbreviations. You can't abbreviate things on a death certificate. So all that stuff happens. Then once they approve it and give it a number, then they mail that death certificate through the mail and back to the funeral home. Funeral home distributes those. And that's how the families end up getting the death certificates. They may ask how many you want. I always tell families I'm not a funeral home guy, but what I have learned is you'll need one for bank accounts. You'll need one for Social Security. You'll need one for a lot of things. So it's best to get more than you need, because in turn those become very important. A lot of people were like, well, just give me a copy of yours. Well, we can't, because ours has draft written on it. So it's stamped on there as draft, and they will not take those because it's not an official record. So you need that official record to be able to handle your business to get it taken care of. So my theory is, and what I do is I sign death certificates out at least twice a week. That doesn't keep families waiting, nor does it keep funeral homes waiting for any length of time, that if I only sign them out once a week, because we have so many cases. Like I said, just over the weekend, we did 8 to 10 cases. So in turn, that's 8 to 10 families that's waiting now to get a death certificate. And those are all going to have to wait 2 to 3 weeks. I don't want them waiting any longer, so I try to hurry that process along.
Yeah. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is sometimes they may need a copy years down the road, and people don't know that Vital Statistics is who that they can contact, because we only carry that draft copy in our files. That's
correct. And it's not only families that need those. Somebody on parole and probation, they have to have a copy of a death certificate that's an official copy, so they can close their case out on that person. If somebody, and everybody's like, well, it's pretty obvious, if somebody's deceased, they should close the case out, but no, we have to follow paperwork. Paperwork means everything to us. Forms mean everything to us. As you know, I've got a whole wall of forms that we have a form for everything so we can track things. And that death certificates are no different. Is once that's closed, people don't realize either that they can get a death certificate online. So you can go online these days on Vital Statistics and in turn get that death certificate and get that sent to you electronically that way through Vital Statistics after you pay a certain amount. So there's several ways that they can get that and keep up with that.
So you're not necessarily the only person that signs out death certificates in terms of hospice or hospital deaths. So who signs those deaths out in those type of cases?
Those are usually handled by the treating doctor. It's like the hospital. If somebody dies in the hospital, it's a natural death. They've been there less or over 24 hours, and we feel that it's not a coroner's case, then the hospital treating physician will sign that death certificate out, and we have no control over that. Now, there are laws in place. One of the laws says that a physician is supposed to have that death certificate signed within 5 days of somebody being deceased. What it says for the coroner's office, and we're lucky with this because we got this passed a couple of years ago, is that we have to sign that death certificate out 5 days after all of our testing is back. We talked about maybe the second episode when we did the episode on the medical examiner and coroner and what really happens. One of the things we mentioned is that autopsy may take a minimum of 45 days to get. So we have that length of time, and as soon as that time hits is when the autopsy shows up to us. And once we get the autopsy, then we can say, okay, it's this long, it's this. So we have those 5 days for me to sign that out. And I take as much time as I need to make sure I got every piece of the puzzle. And it's 100%. We want that puzzle to be 100% of this is why they died and get it signed out then.
And I think maybe one thing to touch on is the cremations that you also have to sign and verify before somebody can get cremated.
Yeah, cremation is permanent.
Yeah.
It's not like we can exhume that body or anything else. So by law, anybody that dies in our county, so anybody that dies in Boyd County, and they want them cremated, the funeral home fills out all their paperwork, and then they will send over the provisional form of death. And on the bottom of that provisional form of death, it says that I know the circumstances behind why somebody died. So in turn, we have a natural death form. If it's not our case, we have that natural death form that we can look at, and it gives me why that person died, why the physician is signing it the way they're signing it. If I'm okay with it, then I sign that form and I send it back. Those can be as many as 5 to 10 a day. We sign out, last year we signed 500 of those out, right at 500. And the years before, we went as high as 650 of people getting cremated. And we may do a show about that one day with a funeral director, for the simple fact that people don't understand that a lot of times. But cremations, when I started doing this job, I signed out about 85 in a year. Now that's up to 500, 600 of those. And the reason being, a lot of times, is just the times that we're in. People a lot of times don't believe anymore that everybody has to be buried. Money is a major driving factor of why you cremate compared to having a burial. So there's several reasons to do that, but we still are tracking those deaths, and we're still reviewing every one of those deaths. And in Boyd County, that's about 1,200 of those a year that we actually go through and look at and review and make sure there's nothing wrong.
So now some common questions I think that get asked are, because people have to pay for funeral home services and stuff, do people have to pay for the coroner services?
They don't. All of our services are free. Those are, and the neat thing about Kentucky is we don't pay for our autopsies.
Yeah.
Those go through the Department of Criminal Justice, and those do not cost us anything. We also do not pay for our toxicology testing that we do. That's included on a contract with the medical examiner's office, which we do toxicology ourselves. We're not, if somebody gets toxicology, it's not like we're driving them 2 hours. We bring them to our morgue, and that's part of what we do with our external examinations. So none of that is costing anybody anything. In Kentucky, we don't pay for me to sign a cremation. If you go into different states, and several different states, the coroner is paid every time he signs a cremation. It's X number of dollars. It's called a cremation permit. And there's a lot of funeral homes that we work with in other states that are very surprised that Kentucky doesn't have that.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that we see across the country that's completely different than what we do.
Okay, so another question is, can families stay with their loved ones when they pass away? Within reason, yes. If we get there and we think something's not right, or we think something is suspicious, then of course we move families out as quick as we can. But there's many cases that we show up at a house
and a loved one sitting beside them on the bed, or they pulled a chair up or something like that, and we'll talk there. But our ultimate goal is to let them away from the decedent so we can get our pictures done and things like that. And we try to do that in a timely manner, but we do also give families time. It's like at the hospital. The hospital's pretty neat for us because King's Daughters has big rooms, and we can go in and talk to a family in a consultation room, and then once we get that person cleaned up, we can let that family come back, and they can come back and stay as long as they want. We don't rush anybody. I wouldn't want to be rushed if it was my family member.
Yeah.
So that's one of the big things that we always kind of make sure that we accommodate the families to where that's taken care of.
Okay. So now, we've kind of touched on this, but how long do you think an unnatural death investigation takes?
We're still looking, even an unnatural or unexpected probably is what you're
unexpected.
Yeah, like an unexpected death, we're still looking anywhere from the 8 to 10 hour range. It just depends on, and that's start to finish. That's death certificate, that's everything. But a normal death will take us, we will work probably 4 to 5 hours from we do scene time, arrive on the scene, talk to the families, go back to the morgue. One of our investigations is we collect all medicines. We collect anything that has that person's name on it. And we bring that back and we count every bit of those. Yesterday, they had a case, and literally...
Thank goodness I was out of town.
Yeah, I mean, counting medications was 6 pages.
Yeah.
6 pages of medications. And so, because people, they keep medications, whether it be old or new.
And that's about 25 on a page also.
Yeah, so that's 25 on a page. People get 90 days prescriptions. Yeah. That takes forever. All that stuff gets, you're sitting there going, okay, this is more and more and more. But the reason we do that is, number one, to see compliance. Number two, to see if they may have took too much of something. That's also an interview with the families. Do they normally take that? We had a elderly case me and you had, and the lady had some methadone in a suitcase. And she, in turn, when I called the daughter and talked to her, she was like, hey, I figured you'd be calling me. I said, well, the toxicology's back and everything, and we really need to talk. And she said, well, I don't think we do, because I've been waiting for this phone call.
Yeah.
And so once I explained things to her, she understood deep down, but it changed the whole dynamic of how I signed that death certificate out. And this was an elderly person, so we see that all the time. A lot of people don't realize, for years our mean age or our average age of death from an overdose was between 50 and 55.
Yeah.
And now that's dropped down to between 35 and 45, but still it's there. And so that's why we do what we do, no matter what the investigation is. No matter if it's somebody 78, 80 years old at a house, we're still investigating it the exact same way as we would if that person was an 8-year-old or a 5-year-old or an 18-year-old. There's just more steps a lot of times.
Okay, so now we'll get into our questions from the public. So the first question is from Joshua Smith from Hazard, and he asks, what kind of jurisdiction and authority does the Kentucky Coroner have?
The Kentucky Coroner is an elected official that falls under Chapter 72 of the Kentucky Revised Statutes, or KRS. In turn, that gives us full police powers when we're doing our duties. It doesn't mean that we have full police powers all across the state of Kentucky. It's what jurisdiction we're working and at that time what we're doing. If we're on duty, things like that. But it's full police powers just like anybody else would have as far as a police officer goes. We can collect evidence. We can obtain search warrants and get those signed by judges. We can do every bit of that. But what we do mainly is collaborate with whatever law enforcement agencies that's there, and we offer our expertise on what we think needs to happen next.
Okay, and then the next one is from Krista Coons from Russell, and she asked, if you could change one thing about public understanding of your job, what would it be?
The biggest thing is, and we're going to, and it kind of leads into where we're going to go next week, is funding and things like that into a coroner's office and the crisis that we see across the whole United States when it comes to death investigations. And with that is people think that it is a part-time job, that we're sitting here waiting for somebody to die. We go out and we say, yes, they're dead, and we in turn call a funeral home.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that, and it's not that at all. It's a 24/7 job. We work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Somebody has to be on call. And that's where the funding comes in. And if it's not funded correctly, I told you this earlier, and one of the things that you'll hear me say next week is it truly depends on where you die as what kind of investigation you get. And we want to make sure that that person gets the best investigation possible. So I think that's one of the biggest things that the public needs to understand is everything to us is a homicide. Everything to us is a murder until we can prove otherwise. And we prove that by doing a thorough investigation. We do that by doing the same things over and over every single time, and then adding steps that we need to add as we move forward through forensic testing, through a lot of different things. And then that opens up the door a whole different spill of everything that we do. So I think that's the biggest myth that we see and what the people do not understand whatsoever.
Yeah, very good answer. Very good. That was our answers from the public this time. So if you have any questions that you want answered or anything that we haven't maybe gone into as full detail as you want, so you have some more questions on those, make sure that you're leaving those. You can email us. You can get on our Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. Either way, you can contact us. Again, make sure you're sharing all those social medias out so that we can keep giving you guys what you want.
Yeah, our numbers are growing every week. They grow daily. When we started doing this is something that we truly believe in, and me and Bailey want to keep on doing this. We're still looking for sponsors. The sponsors do not have to be industry sponsors, so that we don't have to be cleanup companies. We don't have to be funeral homes or anything like that. We're looking for anybody that wants advertisement for their business. This is growing daily, and we want to continue to grow this, so we want to thank the audience. That's a big thing. We do know that death is curiosity. People don't like to talk about it, but they're curious about it, and that's why we're here. We'll continue to do this every week, and thank you all very much.
Thank you.